You ever look at someone's vacation photos on Instagram and think, wow, they're living the dream, but then later find out those smiles were forced? That's the feeling I get when I look back at Zac Efron's so-called yacht boy days. On the surface, it was all champagne, billionaires, and Mediterranean sunsets. But word behind the scenes is that those yachts weren't paradise, they were cages. And Zac's latest words, tone, and choices are starting to expose that what looked like freedom was actually a performance under pressure. Let's dive into what he's been hinting at and why the story of his yacht years is bigger, darker, and more revealing than anyone thought.
Work on the high seas, it doesn't sound like an environment that would be conducive to sobriety, especially for someone who has a history of relapse and self-destruction. I mean, this summer he was spotted heading onto a yacht the same day as his high-profile ex, Vanessa Hudgens, was leaving the hospital with her newborn baby. So is it reaching to think that there might be a link here, that he sees yachting as part of his addiction/coping mechanisms? But it's not like Vanessa having a baby is enough to throw Zac off the wagon on its own. The truth is, Zac has been struggling for a long time, and all of the signs have been hiding in plain sight.
Insiders whisper that the label Yacht Boy stuck to Zac like a designer jacket he never asked to wear. At first glance, it sounded playful, almost glamorous. Fans on social media laughed about it, made memes, and treated it like a cheeky inside joke. But behind the laughter was a darker truth. That label was branding. It turned Zac into an accessory, a curated image that powerful men could showcase on their floating palaces. For Zac, it wasn't an honor, it was expectation.
Fortunately, it can sometimes get a bit seedy, a bit creepy with drunk people who think they can do whatever they want. These owners, these millionaires, these billionaires, they're incredibly powerful people, and a lot of the time they get their own way. It's an incredibly secretive world, which no one really knows much about. The guests just use super yachts as their little playground. They live in this little bubble where they think anything goes and anything can happen.
Invitations weren't about enjoying the ocean breeze or popping champagne for fun. They were about showing up, dressing the part, and serving as proof that the men in charge could pull stars into their orbit. He was a trophy in motion, a glittering ornament in their collection of influence. On the surface, Yacht Boy suggested leisure, but in reality, it was a leash, keeping him tethered to a role he didn't design, performing a part written by someone else. Every photo snapped on deck reinforced the label. Every headline cemented it. What looked like luxury to fans was to Zac, a costume he had to wear whether he wanted to or not. Hollywood chatter claims that every invitation to those yachts came with invisible strings. These weren't carefree parties, they were auditions without scripts. Who could charm? Who could comply? Who could prove useful in the future?
Not only is the yachting industry creepy AF, as the worker, these situations can cause feelings of shame or regret, and sometimes the allegation that someone might be a yacht person is weaponized against them, whether it's true or not. Now, I do want to make the distinction here and say that there shouldn't be an inherent shame in the work itself. At the same time,
the talk in town is that the true price of admission wasn't money. It was obedience to whatever the powerful men expected. For Zac, that meant his presence wasn't about friendship. It wasn't even about fun. It was about value. He was there because his fame elevated the room, because his face on a yacht made it look exclusive. He became part of the currency traded between power players. His attendance a commodity, his smile a form of payment. Think of it like Hollywood's unspoken economy. On land, deals happen in boardrooms and restaurants. At sea, they happened under the guise of sunsets and cocktails. Zac wasn't just enjoying a weekend trip. He was being measured, evaluated, and silently tested. And the cost of failing that test? Closed doors back on shore.
Sadly, this is not surprising to me. Now, I don't think Zac is going to create an OF page anytime soon because yachting is a lot more elite than that, and you make a lot more money.
Word behind the scenes is that Zac didn't stay quiet for all these years because nothing happened. He stayed quiet because silence was survival. The same men who controlled the yachts controlled introductions, studio nods, and opportunities. Speaking out too soon would have meant being cut off. Silence kept the waters calm, even if inside he was storming. It's important to see his quiet years as strategy, not weakness. By keeping his head down, Zac bought himself time. Time to build a resume. Time to grow his independence. Time to reach a point where he no longer needed those men's approval.
Workers, and in this case, these high-profile workers. So with considerations of their reputation, along with their physical safety, as I mentioned earlier, the stakes are high. So yeah, the concern people have for Zac being tied to all of this is definitely understandable. Even if Zac wasn't engaging in
Every carefully chosen word in interviews, every avoided question, every polite deflection was part of a playbook designed to keep him safe while he figured out how to stand on his own. But now the tone has changed. The heaviness in his voice during recent interviews, the subtle admissions about Hollywood pressure, the way he shifted his projects, all of it points to a man whose decided exposure is safer than silence. That silence was once a shield. Today, his truth has become the weapon.
Zac Efron is allegedly a yacht boy.
Zac Efron earns a big payday while on a luxurious yacht with older men. His net worth has increased by $5 million from other ventures outside of acting.
Why would somebody with multiple stints in rehab vacation in Ibiza?
The talk in town is that the yachts photographed as floating paradises were actually cages disguised as playgrounds. To fans, the images screamed luxury, turquoise seas, sprawling decks, champagne on ice. But insiders whisper that the very isolation that made them alluring also made them traps. On land, Zac could leave a party whenever he wanted. He could slip out a side door, get into a car, disappear into the night. At sea, there was no exit. Once the yacht left the harbor, you were locked into whatever the night became. Surrounded by wealth, there was nowhere to go, no one to call, no lifeline. That isolation gave powerful men the upper hand. They dictated the rules and everyone else played along. To the world, those sunsets were picture perfect, but to Zac, they could feel suffocating. Paradise isn't paradise when you can't walk away. It becomes prison dressed up in designer linens. And that's the shadow behind the smile. The realization that freedom isn't found on a yacht. It's the thing you lose when you're stuck on one. Online circles didn't just glance at those yacht photos, they dissected them like crime scenes. Twitter threads zoomed in on Zac's posture, noting how often he leaned away from the men beside him. TikTok creators slowed down paparazzi footage, pointing out his tight jaw, or the way his sunglasses seemed more like a shield than an accessory. On Reddit, users built whole timelines of his yacht boy era, comparing expressions across events, searching for signs of strain. To casual fans, these might have looked like vacation candids, smiles in the sun, laughter over champagne. But to those watching closely, they looked like coded messages, a forced grin, a half laugh, a body positioned just behind the spotlight, not in it. The narrative forming online wasn't of a man enjoying paradise, but of someone enduring it. Fans became amateur detectives not because they were nosy, but because something about Zac's eyes in those photos felt off. The glitz didn't match the gaze, and once people saw the disconnect, they couldn't unsee it. Industry buzz suggests Zac's yacht years weren't a unique story. They were part of a larger pattern whispered about in Hollywood. Yachts have long been described as the floating boardrooms of the elite. Deals happen there, roles are discussed there, lines blur there. Away from the red carpets and press junkets, yachts are where Hollywood's power brokers test boundaries and rewrite rules, knowing no cameras can follow. The fact that Zac's name keeps circling in these whispers proves he wasn't just a guest dropping by for fun. He was caught in the machinery of that system. To the outside world, he was a rising star mingling with industry titans. To those inside, he was another player being measured, observed, and pushed into positions that benefited others more than himself. People in the know call it an open secret. Everyone whispers about it, few speak it aloud. Zac's hints, his tone, his choices, all confirm that the secret was real. And his story shows just how hard it is to walk away once you've been pulled into the current. Insiders point out that after those yacht-heavy years, Zac's entire career took a sharp turn. Gone was the carefree golden boy of High School Musical, the heartthrob who sang about basketball and love under the stars. In his place emerged an actor who sought out darker, heavier material. Ted Bundy in Extremely Wicked, shockingly evil and vile, Kevin Von Erich in The Iron Claw. Roles drenched in shadows, characters defined by struggle, pain, or downfall. Hollywood chatter says those choices weren't accidents. They were reflections of his own inner battles. He wasn't chasing blockbusters, he was chasing truth. By stepping into characters scarred by trauma and weighed down by darkness, Zac found a way to channel his own experiences without saying them outright. Fans noticed too. Comment sections lit up with lines like, "He's not acting, he's exercising something. And this isn't Troy Bolton anymore, this is a man who's been through it." The transformation wasn't just career evolution, it was a mirror held up to his own past. Rumors in the circle say the cruelest part of the nickname Yacht Boy was in the second word, boy. On the surface, it implied youth, charm, a kind of innocence, but insiders whisper that it was also a tool of control. By calling him a boy, the powerful men around him reduced him. They stripped him of adulthood, of agency, framing him as someone too young, too green, too dependent to resist. It infantilized him, turning him into an object of spectacle, not a man with choices. Every time the label spread online, it reinforced that image. Zac wasn't Zac anymore. He was the boy on the boat. A role written by others, recited in headlines, and repeated until it clung to his reputation like a scar. The irony is sharp. Fans once used the phrase jokingly, enviously, thinking it represented freedom and fun. But for Zac, the word boy was a chain. It kept him locked in a narrative that downplayed his struggles and dismissed his discomfort. What the world saw as playful branding, he experienced as another form of reduction. Whispers online hint that the men who surrounded Zac weren't just wealthy, they were gatekeepers. These weren't nameless billionaires. They were the type who could greenlight a film with a handshake, secure a brand deal with a phone call, or blacklist someone with a single word. Being seen on their yachts wasn't about fun, it was about leverage. For Zac, one night on deck could mean his name ended up in a studio conversation the next week. A smile at the right moment might unlock a campaign deal with a global brand. But here's the darker layer. Those benefits weren't free. They came with an unspoken price tag. His presence wasn't casual, it was transactional. His reputation became part of the bargaining table. And that's when Zac's story stops being just personal. It becomes institutional. The system itself allows exploitation to masquerade as opportunity. Young stars are pulled in with promises of access, but access often comes at the cost of autonomy. Zac's yacht boy days were never just about him. They were about a machine that keeps spinning, powered by the compliance of those it ensnares. Hollywood chatter claims that when Zac finally cracked the veneer, dropping hints, letting his tone reveal what his words didn't, it wasn't just cathartic for him. It was dangerous, because in Hollywood, illusion is currency. As long as the photos looked glamorous, the smiles convincing, the story of the yachts stayed intact. But Zac's choice to let the mask slip shattered that illusion. Suddenly, fans and insiders alike were forced to re-examine everything they thought they knew. Every glossy photo became suspect. Every staged smile looked like camouflage. What once screamed luxury now whispered coercion wrapped in good lighting. The brilliance of Zac's reveal wasn't in shouting names, it was in forcing people to connect the dots themselves. By refusing to spell it all out, he left space for imagination to fill in the blanks. And often the images our minds create are far more haunting than any headline could be. The talk in town is that Zac's quiet revelations triggered a tidal shift in fan response. At first, people sympathized. They mourned the idea that his bright smile had hidden storms. But sympathy quickly hardened into rage. Suddenly, comment sections lit up with fire. They sold him as a product. This isn't glamour, it's exploitation. The memes that once joked about Yacht Boy vanished, replaced with threads demanding accountability. Fans weren't laughing anymore, they were mobilizing. Reddit threads turned into investigative hubs. TikTok creators posted breakdowns of yacht culture, and Twitter users tagged studios calling out the invisible power players. And just like that, the so-called untouchable men behind the yachts weren't invisible anymore. They became shadows looming over every conversation about Zac. What started as gossip had evolved into collective outrage. The fans weren't just watching, they were demanding the script be rewritten. Industry insiders whisper that Zac's subtle exposure rattled Hollywood to its core. If someone as high-profile as Zac, Disney's golden boy, a box office draw, a household name could be caught in this velvet trap, then who else had been pulled in? Behind closed doors, conversations began to shift. Writers asked themselves how many scripts were handed out based on yacht-side agreements. Agents debated the thin line between mentorship and manipulation. Young actors whispered in confidence about their own experiences, emboldened by the fact that Zac's hints had cracked the silence. The yacht stopped being a symbol of fun and started being a symbol of scrutiny. Zac's revelations turned the industry's gaze inward. Suddenly, the question wasn't just what happened to him, it was who else is still stuck out there, smiling on deck, pretending paradise isn't prison. Hollywood chatter claims Zac's story is proof of fame's velvet trap. On the outside, it's irresistible. Yachts, parties, red carpets. But inside, it's a maze of compromises, of smiles masking discomfort. Fame doesn't just open doors, it locks you in. Zac's exposure peeled back the curtain, showing how many stars are drowning while pretending to float. Fans online see Zac's move as reclamation. By speaking out, he turned Yacht Boy from a mocking label into a warning sign. What was once used to belittle him now informs others. It's his way of saying, that wasn't freedom, that was captivity, and by redefining the label, he ensured no one else could use it against him again. The talk in town is that Zac's words, even indirect, ignited a quiet revolution. Writers' rooms, agencies, and fan communities started asking harder questions about power, consent, and the hidden costs of ambition. Without anger, without spectacle, Zac sparked clarity. And in Hollywood, clarity is louder than scandal. Here's where I think this is heading. Zac won't stop here. His career choices, his interviews, even his silences will keep pulling focus back to the darker truths of his past. He's no longer just the golden boy who sang on rooftops. He's the man who pulled the mask off an entire culture. And I believe his next project will lean even further into that narrative, using art to expose what words still can't. The era of Yacht Boy is over. The era of Zac Efron, truth teller, has just begun.